Welcome to our web exclusive. I'm Mike Montecalvo, along with Eyewitness News analyst Lieutenant General Reginald Centracchio. Big topic, General, we'll talk about today is the unrest in Egypt. It just continues. Now finding out thousands of workers are on strike. They're demanding better pay, better benefits, and working conditions, and the protests just keep on going. Basically, they want Hosni Mubarak out. You don't see that anytime soon?
I don't see that anytime soon. I think what we're looking at is the next step is going to be to have someone call in the military to put down what I think will be, over the next several days, a further uprising and further violence. Whether the military actually complies with whatever direction they get will be a good signal as to exactly what's going to happen as far as the administration is concerned. If they don't back Mubarak, then you'll see him go a lot quicker than he anticipates that he might.
Well, the country's vice president is saying or telling protesters that this will not be tolerated much longer. Is that the first sign that the military will, come into play here?
Yeah, I think so. I think it'll be a combination between the police, and if the police go in, then you'll have a tremendous escalation of violence. The military still has a lot of respect on behalf of the people. If they go in with somewhat of a violent approach to quelling the violence that's going on, that's a whole new situation. So you have the police on one hand and the military on the other hand. If you have a combination of that, that could escalate into something we don't want to see.
Why is the military still respected and the police and Mubarak not?
Because the military is a conscription organization. Their friends, their relatives, their cousins, their uncles are all members of the military, unlike the police, who are specifically police officers and not military. So there's still a lot of respect for the military because they're representative of the society that they serve.
What's the chances of the vice president turning on Mubarak?
I think that's a very strong possibility, and that test will come when the order is given. If it's given for the military to intervene, if we find that they will not comply with the Mubarak, then you'll see he may gravitate over to taking over the country, and the military will probably give their allegiance to him. Well,
2 protesters were killed this week. Do we ever see democracy in this country, or democracy as basically we know it?
As we understand it, I don't think you'll see that. We operate under a republic democracy. With the scenario as it's presenting itself now, we need to be aware that when you have the Muslim Brotherhood as part of that opposition, a true democracy could very well mean that you would have the Muslim Brotherhood in charge, and obviously you would go from what's supposed to be a democracy to an immediate theocracy, having a radical Islamic government in place.
Well, we talked about this last week. They claim they want nothing to do with that. They're not backing any candidate for the September elections. It's just talk. Are they making a move here?
I think what they're doing is just positioning themselves for the appropriate time. I do believe if it deteriorates, as we're seeing it start to do that right now, you will definitely see, in my opinion, the Muslim Brotherhood attempting to get at least part of the government, and when that happens, you have their foot in the door, so to speak, such as we saw Hamas in the Palestinian scenario.
General, last week we heard a lot from President Obama and Hillary Clinton. Not hearing a lot this week. We're not hearing from other countries anymore. Why is that?
I think they're taking the approach of really walking very softly, because if you endorse an outright uprising, then you will have thrown the existing government under the bus, so to speak. If you back too much in one way to the existing government, then you somewhat dissuade the public from protesting as they are. So you need to walk right in the middle, because whoever falls out of this thing, we need to have a good relationship with them, considering that needs to continue to be a great ally for the United States.
Well, we've seen the pictures. They want no help, at least the citizens and the protesters, they want no help from the United States.
Well, that's the scary part, because we've got to maintain that someone of responsibility maintains control of the Suez Canal and the pipeline. You just saw this past couple of days that the prices of oil spiked tremendously. Without that oil coming through the Suez Canal, and specifically the pipeline, oil will undoubtedly go well beyond a $100 a barrel.
Well, the pyramids have been reopened, and that is a big plus for Egypt. The problem is they're not getting tourists anymore, because all the tourists have left.
That's correct, and that was one of the responses you got from some of the local tourist individuals. Even though they opened the pyramids and the Sphinx, there is no tourism to be able to go and appreciate visiting them to begin with. So I think it's a facade to begin with, about say, okay, we're getting back to normal. We've opened the pyramids, opened the Sphinx. There's nobody there to go to it.
The oil price is skyrocketing temporary, or do you see it just continuing?
No, I think it'll be for the foreseeable future, because until there's some stability within Egypt, which is one of the major controlling factors, Egypt doesn't produce any oil. but they certainly control the Suez Canal, and they certainly control the pipeline. Those are two very critical areas that we need to sustain in order that we see an even flow coming out of the Middle East to be able to fuel the need for oil both in the United States and in Europe.
You know, General, at the beginning it was a peaceful protest, but we're not seeing peaceful protest anymore. It seems like now that, you know, the weeks are going by, you know, the people are getting restless.
I think when I've heard several analysts talk about who was doing the initial protest. In the initial phases of the protest, there was a genuine representation of the people themselves wanting to see change, because many of those kids are below age 30 without jobs. They want to see a change to the economy. As the days progressed, and I think we're well into the second week now, you're seeing the actual protesters not being the genuine protesters that were there in the beginning. Then you're starting to see a lot of infusion of different, the radical approach, and undoubtedly you're seeing the violence unfold as we speak.
And what the General was talking about, there's about 8,000 that have barricaded themselves in part of Cairo, and most of them are farmers, so that would kind of go into the mix there of, exactly, you know, under 30 and under 40.
You're seeing some divisiveness within the society itself.
Okay, let's move closer to home. The casino seems to be a big issue this week in the state of Rhode Island. Governor Lincoln Chafee is looking at that. We're talking about not just Lincoln, but Newport, and he kind of tossed into this whole mix, too, that the Narragansett Indians could also play a part in all of this. General, do you see 3 different places in the state of Rhode Island?
You know, I think eventually you're going to see one resort, and that's going to be at Lincoln. And I think we need to be prepared that whatever that brings, if it's a full casino and a destination resort, with that is going to bring a tremendous responsibility to afford the public safety issues which will undoubtedly come with it. When you start bringing, you know, big money into the state, as it undoubtedly will, you have to worry about the local community, the kind of crime that will come with it. And the bottom line is, we're not going to see an appreciable amount of money coming into the state coffers, because you're going to be looking at a place that's going to be running it that will be getting the lion's share of the money coming in.
Well, they're claiming $64 million would go to the state of Rhode Island. How much of that goes to the local community for, let's say, policing? You
know, versus an $800 million deficit that we're looking at over the next couple of years, I don't think $60 million is going to mean an awful lot. And if you start splitting that up into the local communities, you know, I don't think a lot of it's going to go to satisfying the tremendous debt we have in the state and the unfunded mandates we have, such as the pension program and other considerations, and to gain back our ability to borrow money at a lower rate.
Should this go to a special election, or we just wait for the next general election?
You know, I think we're going to see, unfortunately, I think you'll see a lot of things happening in the next 4 years that perhaps won't be able to go to the general referendum or the general population voting on it. So I think you'll see a lot of things happening. Governor Chafee talked about it over the last several days, saying in his mind he didn't see any significant difference between a video table and a live table. Perhaps he has a point there. But at the same time, once you open it up and you allow full-fledged gaming to take place, you're going to be in competition with Connecticut, Massachusetts, and every other state in the region, meaning that we have to be not only competitive, but one step better, because we have to be number one.
Well, the gun to your head is that Massachusetts is talking about opening up several, so that's basically what we're talking about here. If it goes to the voters this time around, you see them approving it, especially when you're looking at $300, $400 million in debt?
I don't know. You know, I wish I could have a good answer for that, but based upon previous referendums, it didn't pass. I think the people of the state don't want to see an economy and revenue source being based upon gambling. They need to see jobs that are available for the working class and the people and kids out of college to be able to do what they went to college for in the state, and that's not only gambling.
All right, changing gears, federal prosecutors in the state of Rhode Island have charged a civilian employee of the Navy and a Navy contractor with a $10 million kickback and bribery scheme. Basically, it was for no-show jobs. What does this say, though, with corruption within the Navy and the military, General?
I think when you look at the commitment that Defense Secretary Gates made, that he would take billions of dollars out of the defense budget over the next several years, a lot has to be said about the fraud and waste and abuse that takes place in the defense system to begin with. This is an indication that we could perhaps save billions of dollars just by identifying the fraud, waste, and abuse that takes place not only here in Rhode Island, obviously, and the Defense Department and the Navy specifically, but if you extrapolate that across the entire country, I'm positive that you could see different areas that have suggested fraud, waste, and abuse.
How do you police that, though?
You got to have internal investigations. You got to have a follow the money scenario. Someone has to be accountable. That when you sign over, billions of dollars, someone has to say, okay, show me where it went, where did it go, and who has control and accountability over that money. This apparently was an area that wasn't looked into until after the fact.
And finally, Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld has a book out. Did you finish President Bush's book yet?
Yes, I did.
All right, so now you got another one to go on to. It's a book out on Iraq, and basically he talks about the stealth fighters in this book, too.
Yeah, he did. A good friend of mine, Colonel Tom McCluskey, flew the stealth fighter, and we had conversations like this several times. But this book suggests that many of the things that we saw publicly weren't really the way we saw them as they were being told. In fact, one of the issues in the book told about having a war plan for Iraq within several weeks after the 9/11 scenario. Somewhat different than what was being said over the last several years that we know. So looking for chemical weapons, looking for strikes and capability. The discussion I had with Colonel McCluskey on several occasions was, where do you put your ordnance and where do you surgically strike? And the chemical plant that was talked about in Rumsfeld's book was one indication that perhaps plans were well in place well before the actual invasion.
Well, General, if you look at 9/11, it was just Afghanistan that was on the map. How do you attack two countries like that?
Well, when you look at it, I think we underestimated perhaps Iraq and Afghanistan at the same time, because the intelligence we had, we really relied on rather heavily, and it turned out to be somewhat defective. But at the same time, if you were looking for weapons of mass destruction, we had good reason to believe that there were weapons of mass destruction in places in Iraq that should have been taken out. That didn't happen. On the other hand, we looked at the blocks of terrorism and the camps that were well in place in Afghanistan. At the same time, we seem to be closing one eye to where those terrorists came from to begin with, and that wasn't from either one of those countries.
All right, we could be playing Monday morning quarterback here, but you're saying before 9/11, or in his book, he's saying before 9/11. How does a new president walk into this and say, okay, look, we're going to strike this chemical plant in Iraq when you're not even in office 6 months?
I think, once again, you have to base it upon available intelligence at the time. And at the time, we had some reliable intelligence, not totally reliable, unfortunately, that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. But even before Bush was in office, we gave them 13 years to divest themselves of these weapons, because each and every time the United Nations inspectors went in, he said, get out, we'll tell you when to come back in. That happened over and over and over. And I think that's the time frame that we're looking at, that we knew they were there, but we gave them an ample time to divest themselves. And those weapons are still somewhere, in my opinion, somewhere in the Mideast.
So could it be a failure of Bush 1 and President Clinton?
I think so. Combination of our entire intelligence system to begin with.
Okay. General Centracchio, as always, thank you for your comments.
Good to be here.
Okay. Thanks for watching.